Gear up as Cash Miller and a team of accomplished guests steer you on an enlightening voyage filled with valuable tips, fresh insights, and effective strategies. Welcome to Marketing Masters, the Agency Power Show.
Hello, everyone. This is Cash Miller. I'm host of Marketing Masters, CEO of Titan Digital. Today, I've got with me Ann Carden, expert in you. We're going to be talking about how you build yourself up as an expert because, there are so many advantages. Often in marketing, we don't think about, like the personal brand and building up yourself and your expertise and showing that you are an expert, whether it's an expert in a specific industry. There's so many things you can do, speaking events and books. And, so we're going to be talking about how you go about that. And it's great to have you on. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Thanks, Cash. It is so great to be here with you. So what I do is I work with coaches, consultants, professional entrepreneurs who want to build really high-end businesses. So I help them get those really premium high-end clients. And a big piece of that is how they are marketing themselves as an expert and authority. So I really help them stand out in their niche in a category of one and get the best clients around.
Yeah, I can tell you, like from personal experience, like building yourself up as an expert. I've done a number of like speaking events, and of course, I'm doing a podcast now, and that's another way of showing off expertise. But speaking events for myself, it's there is a payoff for these kinds of things, and it's a money payoff. One of the best examples I would have is like I did a speaking event a couple of years ago, and it was a small like industry event. It was a bunch of like music stores, and they wanted to know about digital marketing because that's what I do and how it would apply to them. And I was invited and I was like, sure, let's go ahead and do it. And I ended up getting, a significantly large client out of it, that's, right. because they had heard me speak. And afterwards, they were doing a little luncheon, and I was invited to stick around. And I sat down, and we talked. But they already knew I knew what I was talking about, and they were with a provider that that wasn't doing a very good job for them. So within a few weeks, they'd made a switch. And that's the thing is you build yourself up as an expert, and if you're really into your industry and you really know what you're doing and stuff, you are an expert. It's just a matter of whether you're willing,
right?
Yeah, yes. You are, but we often forget this. So it's a matter of whether you're willing to put yourself out there, and there's a number of ways to do it, right?
Yes, 100%. And so many people are afraid really to put themselves out there as an expert and an authority, but especially if you've been in your business for a long time, you need to stand out as the expert. So you don't end up, number one, charging beginner prices. I like to say, are you charging like a beginner when you're really an expert? So it affects your money, but it also affects the value of the clients that you get.
Yeah, it really does. Because as you're building yourself up, they say you are an expert, but it's the way you're kind of portraying yourself, with others. And that comes through the things you do because, businesses, we think often about building brands and, doing those types of things. But when you're doing this kind of personal marketing, you're doing it on behalf of the business, but you have to show off your own expertise and you build your own personal brand, as part of that. They may ultimately, do business with your company, but they're going to do that because of you and how you've portrayed yourself and your knowledge.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really interesting. For years when I would teach marketing boot camps, I would call them marketing boot camps, like seminars. And I would tell even insurance agency owners that were in the room, make sure that you are branding you. Make sure that you are not selling yourself as a State Farm agent, but you're selling yourself for who you are. Because if you ever decide to make a switch, you want to make sure that people are doing business with you and not necessarily the company. And so I've been teaching this philosophy for many, many, many years.
Yeah, that's a good, like we as an agency, we've dealt in the independent insurance realm for a long time. And I remember a guy, I was at a conference and I wasn't a speaker there, but someone else, I sat in on a session because there was a guy there from Canada, actually, and he had built up an agency. So they had invited him in to speak about how, because his had become quite sizable, so the idea was, how do others do it, and be able to share. And I always remember that guy because he did the entire thing, and he wasn't like, it's insurance, you think buttoned up, and, no, he was wearing a hockey t-shirt. Like he had the hockey jersey on, and that's what I remember him most, and I know that he does other events like that, and he does that same thing. He always has the hockey jersey on. That's how that's how people remember him. Yeah, he's known for that because he's from Canada, but he does a lot of consulting with agencies on how to build, that they can build themselves up. So he does that kind of as a side, but he always personally brands himself in doing it.
Yes. Yeah, super important. It's just one piece, but your personal brand, I always call it positioning, right? Your positioning in the market has to be strong so that you do stand out in a category of one, so nobody else looks like you do. And there are a lot of things that go into that. I wear blue a lot. My colors are blue. And so I don't do it every time, but most of the time when I'm a guest, I do. I don't always do blue on my own podcast, for example, but if I'm speaking, if I'm a guest, if I'm in front of the room with other people, I always make sure I'm in my brand colors. And so people know me for the blue as much as my logo and everything else that I do.
Yeah, it's the little touches like that. But as you're doing different things, you do start to become known. So let's talk about some of the things you can do. Okay. So if you're trying to build, on the top level, like I mentioned, books and speaking events, but what are, give us an array, I guess, of things that, you typically recommend of ways that they can show off expertise, really start to build recognition, within when you're trying to go this route.
Yeah, I think the important thing to know is that it really depends on who your audience is and where they are. But regardless, you need to have a strong online presence, because that is non-negotiable anymore if you're going to be in business, because people are going to check out your business. It doesn't matter what kind of company you are. We just had some things done to our home, and what did we do? We went and checked out the people, right? And we looked at the Google reviews, and we went and checked out their website, and we looked at all the things that they do. So if you don't have a strong presence online, even if a lot of the speaking and stuff that you're doing offline, you're going to, number one, you're going to miss out on opportunities to get picked up for things like speaking engagements and partnerships and things like that. But you are also, you're going to really not look like the expert and the authority in your industry. And so you really can't afford to not do that. But speaking, books, getting published. I've been on lots of magazine covers and published in the media a lot. That's a great way. Getting in the media is a great way. Also, getting on other people's, not just stages, but other people's shows, like I am with you here today, Cash. Yeah. And I have my own podcast. So there's multiple ways, but you really have to know how people will find you, how they will look for you, because it's hard to do everything. And so you want to at least start with one or two things that are really going to work. And then what is your end goal? What are you trying to accomplish? That's a really important factor too. And then reverse engineer. What's going to be the best strategy for you to put in place to build up your brand and be seen by the people you want to be seen by?
Well, let's talk about some of these, let's break up a few of these things down. So in the case of being on other people's shows and, whether it's podcasts or anything like that. So how would you go about doing that? Just some examples of how you would get started in that realm. And we'll kind of go through each one a little bit.
Sure. So one of the strategies that I teach my clients is how to do guesting on people's podcasts or virtual stages, either one. And it really does start with, again, a strategy. As you know, you're a marketer. You need to know how can you get in front of your ideal people, or in the case, the strategy I teach is how can you get clients or partnerships through your podcast. So it's even more than just, I want to get in front of their audience. That's one way. But what if the host or the person that you're getting on their podcast, what if they could be a client, or what if they could refer business to you? And so we use it really those two different ways. What's the opportunity there, so that you're strategic in everything that you're doing with that podcast? But it's really curating the list of the shows that you want to be on that would be a good fit for whatever your strategy is going to be. And then it's as simple as reaching out. You do need to have things that are going to show credibility. And I mentioned strong positioning. If your positioning is not strong, if you don't look like you deserve to be on the show, or you don't look like an expert, you're going to get turned down a lot. And so those are foundational pieces that need to be in place first before you go and ask people if you can be on their show. The other thing that's important too, though, is my assistant does all that for me. I don't do that for myself. And so if you want to kind of work at a higher level like that, and you want to really be seen as an expert and an authority, you don't want to be doing that stuff yourself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
That's an image.
No, I agree, because I go on other podcasts as well. In fact, I started doing podcasting as a show because I had been on other podcasts. And so I started to see the value. And of course, we bring on guests like yourself, onto this show. And, because there's value in being a host,
yes.
And you obviously see it because you've got your own show. But I have an assistant as well that's doing a lot of this the legwork to be able to do that, because there's only so much time in the day, and you got to make sure that the effort you're putting in is it's well placed. The shows that you go on,
show up and do the fun stuff.
yeah, pretty much.
Let your assistants do the other stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's value in podcast, going on podcasts and other shows, being part of like webinars or, things that might be educational pieces, whatever it might be. You've written some books. Okay. I know that. So like, where's the value? Because that's not an easy undertaking, depending on how you're going to go about it. And there's plenty of ways to get published now, because you can self-publish. And I've talked to some other people that basically say, the value in a book is not in selling the book. The value is in having written the book.
100%. Yes, absolutely. Yes. I believe if you are going to be seen as an expert and an authority, you need a book. One of the things I'm partnered with someone, part of our media agency, is we will get books done for people. We'll actually write them. And we get that done for them so that they can have an expert book, but it's designed to lead people to them for business. So it's not a traditional book where you sit down and it's filled with stories. It really is a marketing piece for you. It would be like a really high-end glorified brochure, like a brochure on steroids, but it's leading people to your business. But it's super important. When I wrote my first one, I don't know, maybe 14 years ago, when I first came into the coaching and consulting space, I wrote it for small business owners because that's who I was working with at the time. And I felt like I had so much that I wanted to get out of all my experience. And so it's really kind of a blueprint for startup businesses. And then as my business sort of evolved and I started working with bigger businesses and helping them grow and scale their business, I wrote another book, and it was a higher level book. And then when I started working with coaches, consultants, professional entrepreneurs, I wrote my bestseller, which is Expert in You, Build a Lucrative and Impactful Coaching and Consulting Business. But I did all of those books because I needed to have an expert book for what I was doing right now. And I think that's an important thing for people to know. A lot of people write motivational books, or they write books, and they're just kind of a disconnect from what they're out there trying to sell. And that doesn't really help them so much. I mean, to say they're an author can help them get on stages and things, but I wrote it because I wanted to get on stages, and I felt like I needed a book to be able to do that.
Well, actually, you talk about it basically also an evolution too, because because your clientele and your coaching practice, your business changed, and who kind of your target was, and so your books changed too.
Yes.
The first one still provides credibility, but you've essentially you kept bringing out some additional ones with the idea that now those are tailored to that new audience.
Yeah. Whatever you want to be an expert for, that's what you should be writing your book around. And you shouldn't just limit yourself to one book. And here's the thing. We're not talking about, you don't have to write a novel. People don't even read novels anymore, really. I mean, they read, I think it's 15 pages of a book. And so when I write books, I try to make them a blueprint that will lead people to want to work with me. And so I think that's an important factor for people to know is what do you want that book to be? So a book can be turned into a program or a course. It can be turned into coaching or consulting programs. So there's a lot of purposes for the book, but it will open those doors for you. It will get you speaking engagements, virtual engagements. It does establish you as an expert and authority. But yeah, you have to think that way. It's not just about being an author. It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it is much deeper than that. And also from the publishing side, I mean, there's all sorts of self-publishing platforms, to be able to do this. And, in all honesty, whoever looks at the publisher anyway, you have a book and most books, they end up on Amazon. I've talked to people that can, get you bestseller, on Amazon because they kind of drill down into being a bestseller in a specific subcategory of things, but you can say that, number one on whatever list, but again, it still adds credibility. It's legit. It's what you're doing. So I say it's got a whole credibility factor to it. And then now this can kind of like lead into speaking events and things like that. So what's the value in doing different, public speaking events and getting, because those are always the scariest things. Like, it's easy enough to get on a podcast and have a one-on-one conversation and you're not really worried about, the audience in the background, or put a book out and say, yeah, I wrote it, and you've got your profile photo, on the page on Amazon of who the author is and things, but you're not out there in front of people. And speaking is the one that really starts to, that's the one that people get petrified about doing.
I love to speak. So,
me too.
I've been doing it 40 plus years. Actually, I've been doing it since I was a kid. I used to do speech contests and things like that. So I love it.
I love it now. When I was growing up, I hated it. I was one of those, I was petrified by the idea of doing any kind of speaking. And the one like most valuable, like when I started going to college, the first thing I did was I knew that because I was going for a business degree and I knew I would end up I had to put myself in those situations. So I started in college and saying, I need to overcome this. So I took like speech 1, speech 2, business communications, everything that would make me speak in front of people. And by the time I was done, I started, and to this day, I still got to stay in practice. I'll do a speaking events because I need to get out in front of people periodically to keep myself, because like I say, I'm, more of an introvert, or at least I was, so, there's a ton of value. One of the most important lesson I ever learned about speaking is if you are comfortable in your subject, you feel like you really know it makes speaking so much easier because you start you don't worry about fumbling. The thing about like in grade school and, get in front of people and everybody laugh at you or whatever because, you stumble, you don't know, you look stupid on, that can't happen if you really know your subject.
Exactly. You can just talk about it all day long. And when you and I got on here, you said, did you get the questions? And I said, no, but it doesn't matter, right? Because you're really not going to ask me anything that I don't think that I won't know how to answer
right.
Because I know my subject, I know my expertise. So, and the other thing too, Cash, I think it's important for people to know that speaking is a skill that can be learned like anything else. I do a lot of virtual speaking strategies with my clients. So like podcasts. So I help them bring in those high-end clients, podcast interview strategy, virtual events. And speaking virtually is different than speaking on a stage. So I've done both and I recommend they do both, but speaking virtually was a whole different ballgame for a lot of people. We saw that through the pandemic where people now had to come online and they had to learn how to speak, on Zoom. So I think it's important for people to know though, that all of these are just skills that you can learn. But here's what I will tell you: when you can speak, and you can put the right strategy behind speaking, you will never be out of work. You will never not have money. You will never be out of a job. It doesn't matter. Communication is one of the best skills you can ever learn. So for people to kind of hide out, like we're just not in that world anymore. So if you want a successful business, somebody needs to be speaking.
Yeah. And, if you're the business owner, it should be you at least part of the time, doing that speaking. And like I say, if you are willing to put yourself out there, the beauty of speaking is it translates into, it's going to make you more polished and better at everything else. So if you're speaking in front of people, you have to remember, like, my strategy is always to try to engage the audience. It can be tough. It can be a hard thing to get them to actually, interact. But whenever I'm doing it, because I want to be able to go that route if I think I can, because I think it settles the audience down some. It gets them engaged more, because otherwise you have people that are tuning out, looking at their phones and, doing that kind of stuff. You don't want to put people, kind of on the spot. You're looking for comfort zones within the audience of people that you think are going to actually interact, versus people that are going to be like petrified. Because some people even in the audience don't want to say anything.
Right.
But it will make you better at, because you're able to really develop your thoughts. I don't do speeches. Everything for me is bullet points. I am, whatever the subject is, I'm going to go through it. And a lot of speaking events, tend to involve slides, and because you're going through something, right? So I do, everything, whatever the presentation is that I'm giving, is going to be tailored. Like, I'm going to tailor that presentation, and then I'm going to be able to speak to it, because that's my bullet points. That's my reminders, during it. And, that way it's so much easier. And when you do those kinds of things, you become more polished doing that. And that helps you on things like podcasts. That helps you in other venues. That helps you one-on-one with people. Like, if you just go to a networking event, because if you can put yourself out in front of a whole crowd, then everything else is easy. Yeah,
it does. It really builds your confidence. And here's the other thing about speaking, that a lot of people think differently about speaking, and, I'm scared, I'm afraid, what if I mess up? And what people really need to realize about speaking is you are there because you have value to bring. And so it's not about you, it's about your audience. And when you take that pressure off of yourself, what is it you're going to give to the audience? It alleviates a lot of that stress, because when you're like all in your head or nervous about it, you're making it too much about you and not about them. And when you show up and you're authentic and you're an expert and you really care about the people that you're speaking to and you're giving, it doesn't matter if you mess up, they're going to be in it for you. And so people look at speaking in the wrong way.
Yeah, they really do. Because you have to remember that, with speaking, you were invited.
That's right.
They saw something in you. They saw, maybe they saw you on a podcast. Maybe they, read that book you wrote, whatever it may be. But that you gave them at some point a reason, even if you're not sure what it is. You gave them a reason that they wanted you to be that expert. So you're right out the gate. You're in command. And you, like I say, make it about your audience. Whenever I do speaking, it's always funny. I end up with about 30 seconds of nervousness before I go on. No matter what, it happens. But I recognize it's going to happen. And as soon as I have the first word come out of my mouth to just say hi to everybody, I'm fine.
Just have fun with it. And it's not brain surgery, right? Just have fun with it, for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. You can have a lot of fun, but at the end, when it's all said and done and you've done that event, and you afterwards though, and you're interacting with some of the people, because it's usually some sort of break or something, you have people that end up asking you, more questions. Because one of the things that I always find, it's the hardest, say, hey, does anybody have any questions? When you're kind of done. It's going to be crickets. It's almost always,
right.
like
they'll come up and ask you after. Yeah.
They'll ask you after, and that's the thing. And that's what that's the time when it turns into, business for you, because it's, you've got people. So it's all about, how you're going to do your kind of follow up afterwards, for interest, so you have to think about that, when you're doing speaking events, it's not just, hey, show up and do the event. What are you going to do kind of after the event? Are you going to end up with a list of attendees? There's value in those kinds of things. And that's why you would, do it. But partnering with different organizations to do that. And it's even leveraging. So if you record the event and then you can give it to somebody else, and then over time, the events might get bigger. Larger audiences.
Yes. There's so many, there are just so many benefits. Speaking is the strategy that I teach people. I call it scalable speaking. Speak your way to to 500K I have a presentation out there. Speak your way to 500K. Because here's the thing, and this is one of the mistakes that people make when they're speaking, is they're very sporadic and they're not strategic. And so a lot of people speak, but it doesn't do anything to help their business. I'm a believer that if you're going to put in the effort and you're going to go do it, make it count. It should bring you business if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur. And so it's really about making sure you're in front of the right audience, making sure that they can buy your services. What is it you're trying to lead people to? That's an important piece. I always say start with the end in mind, reverse engineer. Then what does the presentation need to be? Because here's the thing about speaking, you literally can turn strangers into buyers like that.
Yes.
It builds a know, like, and trust like nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. They just spent the last 30 or 60 minutes listening to you. If you haven't proven that you're an expert in that that amount of time, there's nothing else. Then you just don't have the ability to do it.
Even if it's 20 minutes, you can have a powerful 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, and if you are dialed in, that can turn into a lot of business for you.
Yeah, exactly. So through speaking events, also industry events that might have panels, where you're speaking with others. I've done panels in the past where, we might be speaking, like I've done ones where we speak on social media, and I've gotten like where I'm only supposed to speak about one piece. Okay. And then I'll have other people also speaking about other areas. But if they don't hold up their own, and you can slide in, it's not to necessarily like cut them off or overshadow, or you might overshadow, but that's only because they weren't prepared. That's their fault.
Right.
So if you're prepared, but I've had that kind of thing happen where we do end up with like audience questions and people, and sometimes they can't answer the question, but if you're prepared to be able to answer them, and just because you're, like say, you're an expert. So if your industry knowledge is high, those people end up talking to you and not them afterwards. So there are a number of things that put you in front of people that can be of value. Do you have any other, so we've got speaking, we've got podcasts, we've got books. Are there any other things that you would recommend as ways to put yourself out there and build up that expertise?
Yeah, I think an interview strategy in general. So even if it's not going to necessarily be a podcast, like even live streaming is a great way. I teach my clients how to run virtual events and curate their own audience in the room so that they can then sell and move people into their programs and their services. And so that's a really powerful way. Getting into other people's communities. So one of the things that I teach people is who else has got your audience, and can you go pour into their community and get business that way? So that's another strategy. So everything that I teach my clients to do to get business outside of paid advertising is all around speaking in some way, shape, or form. And there's lots of ways, lots of strategies you can use to do that. But speaking to other people's communities, I'm talking about like a real training. Your audience is going to hear this. So in a way, I'm speaking to your audience, but it's even more dialed in. So if you had a Facebook group, for example, or you had a LinkedIn group, we could set up an event together, and I could train your community and share my expertise. So that's another really powerful way to leverage speaking.
Yeah. Another thing too, that goes, more to the written word, goes back to kind of the books, but you could also there are a lot of publications. I think of Inc. magazine, Forbes. And so there are others that can have the right community for you to be in front of. They have the right readership audience, and there are ways to be able to write for those those different organizations and magazines and things, that can put more stuff out there. 'Cause, everything now is, like I say, it's so much social that they are building communities, so if you go within like LinkedIn, I guarantee you Inc. has got a large following of people that have, that are part of the group. And then as they publish stuff, like I'm a member of the Forbes Agency Council, and we can publish through there stuff that will end up on Forbes. And we were an Inc. 5000 company too. So, Inc. has got a community for people that, have been able, be able to make the list. But that's also, they're willing to allow for publishing on the main platform. So there are things that you can do as long as, you have to look for them. You got to pay attention, and then you got to be able to commit to it, because just like writing a book, it's going to take some time. But again, it's how you're sharing it. It's like, hey, I was just on here. Because remember, building up your own social following and then using that as extra content that is very prominent content. It's one thing to publish something on your own blog. It's another to have it, within a prominent magazine or something.
Right. And you can be a contributor to magazines as well. Are you a contributor to Forbes?
Yeah, for Forbes, I am.
Yes. I'm a contributor to a magazine as well. And you can also have your own magazine. So this is another way too, to start building a brand and getting published. That's something that's been on my list that I want to add as an Expert in You magazine. For entrepreneurs, to feature entrepreneurs. And so there's a lot of ways. We just have so many opportunities and options that we have just not always had. And so, but I just want to bring up one really important point when you were talking about Forbes and all of that, Inc. It's important that you elevate your brand and that you promote the things that you're doing. I know a lot of people that don't promote the great things they're doing. And so it's like, okay, you can't be the best kept secret, right? So if you're going to go to the trouble of writing and getting published or being on the cover of a magazine or whatever that is, now you've got to really promote that across social media. You have to toot your own horn. You have to let people see it. And you can't be afraid to do that. And if you're afraid to do that, you're not elevating your brand. You're not building it. And so I think that's an important factor for people to know too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're going to go to all the effort of doing speaking gigs, writing books, being on podcasts, you have to elevate it as much as possible. That's extremely, otherwise what was the point?
Exactly.
Because
it's
you
like
did
a
all
book,
of this.
If you nobody knows you wrote the book, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, the book is not beneficial if you don't, I say, if you go to this, you do the speaking event and you got a few copies of that book with you, that you give out as freebies or whatever. Hey, you want to know more about this? Here's my book. Like I say, there's so many ways that you up the level of credibility, but you have to do it. If, like I say, you can do all of these individual things, but if you don't actually promote it, it is about tooting your own horn.
Yes. And I think, so that's the one thing. And the other thing is make sure you have a strategy behind anything you do. Otherwise you can burn up a lot of time, even a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, if you don't really have a strategy that's going to drive people to what you are wanting them to drive to. And I see so many people do that. They're speaking to the wrong audiences. They, excuse me 1 minute, I have to cough. I hope you can edit this. Sorry.
It's all good.
Okay. So I see a lot of people that they just don't have a strategy behind what they're doing. And so it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, right? They don't get traction with anything. And that isn't what we're talking about here. And the other piece is consistency. You have to be consistent in what you do. And I see people they really fall off the wagon there as well. So those are the three main things: is people have to see it. You have to have a great strategy, what's going to be the right fit for what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to lead people to. And then you've got to have consistency.
Yep. Yeah, that's always the thing, with all of these things that you can do from a marketing standpoint. If you're not consistent in doing this and elevating your own brand, then, it doesn't work out. I'll give a quick example. There's a guy in our industry. His name is Rand Fishkin, and he is the ultimate in doing this. He started a company years ago called Moz, and Moz is in the SEO industry extremely if you do what we do, you know about them. Okay. Because they put out a lot of software. Now he has since left the company and he's gone and started another one. And, the new one, it's like a totally different, it's still in our field, but it's more of data analytics. Whereas Moz is more like software. SEOs do their job better and stuff. So it's a different type of business, but he speaks all over the place. I saw him speak, and actually I've got an autographed copy of his book because he wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
on his experience in building Moz. And if you mention his name in the industry, it's a guarantee people know who he is. In which case, his new company is called Spark Toro, and he's been able to take that because he built his personal brand. He was able to take. Everybody knew him for Moz, but when he started that new company, everybody knew when he left Moz, and he started that new company, and he was able to pull. It wasn't that he was pulling people from Moz; he was taking those people that dealt with Moz because they wanted to deal with him. They knew that he had put out a great product for a long time. He was the founder and CEO. His book is called Lost in Founder and talks about his experience. But he was able to really immediately have an audience of people willing to look at his new company and the product it was offering because he'd built his personal brand so well.
I am so glad you brought that up because four of the businesses that I owned before I sold them, 2 of them were health clubs and 2 were weight loss centers. And I was able to easily go into business coaching and start up my coaching business because people knew me. Even if they had never been a member of my clubs or had anything to do with my clubs or worked out or anything, people knew me because I built my brand. I built a reputation. And so when I went into business coaching, I was already networking and speaking and doing things for my businesses. It was so easy to just go to business owners and say, hey, I want a business coach. I want to see if I can do it. Will you be my first client? And that was how I launched my business coaching business. And so that's why it's such an important factor. People do business with people, right? And even though I left all those businesses behind and sold them, it made no difference. All it did was build credibility that I knew how to build businesses. And so it made it really easy to step into that. And that's the case. I get opportunities. I just did a summit a couple weeks ago where I interviewed 21 millionaires and experts on my summit. And because of my positioning, even though a lot of the people that I reached out to did not know me or we didn't have a personal relationship, they looked at everything I was doing. They looked at the title of my summit. And I even had people say, well, I don't really do summits, but I'll do it because this looks great. Those things are the things that we're talking about here. There's no shortage of strategies and ways to grow your business and through speaking. But at the end of the day, people have to like you. They have to trust you. They have to know you. And if you're not doing the work to build your brand, you're missing out. And then the one other thing that I just want to say, Cash, is I see people doing the heavy lifting, building their brand, but they're not making any offers. They're not moving people to any business or to any sales. That is a piece you cannot forget about. You have to think about the business side of it. It isn't just about showing up and speaking. How are you going to build your business with this? And so that's something that, believe it or not, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're right. It's not, you have to, with this kind of stuff, you want to be strategic, but know that it translates. You can decide that you don't want to do what you're doing anymore as far as the company that you may, you own, but you may decide you want to go in a different direction. And if you've built the personal brand, well, that part follows.
That's right.
And so all of that value translates over for you.
That's exactly right.
Well, this has been a great discussion, Ann. How would people get a hold of you if they want to utilize your coaching services? Because you really, you know how to build personal brands.
Thank you. Well, you can go to my website at annlcarden.com. I've got a lot of free resources on there. My books are on there. You can grab they're on Amazon, but you can book a call if you are wanting to do this. If you're wanting to step up your game, go to that next level, build your business through what I call scalable speaking. And just really take your brand to a very high level to bring in those premium clients. You can book a call at acarden.com.
Okay, I'm Cash Miller. I'm the host of Marketing Masters, CEO of Titan Digital. We've been talking about how to build your personal brand, how to use things like, speaking events, writing books, putting out, magazine articles, being on podcasts, all of these things can provide tremendous value to building your personal brand and ultimately to the business that you, own and operate. If you're not currently doing it, you should really consider it and think, though, if you're going to do it, be strategic about it. Know what you intend